Hi, everybody. I want to talk to you today about a batch automation and a migration of a system at one of our sites in California. And so I'm going to go that this is very much a kind of an executive summary. I don't get to show you the geeky parts of my original presentation that was given, but if you're interested in that, just let me know. So I'll be going through just an introduction of our issues, an overview. Look at the justifications that we used for our migration and automation. Look a little bit at our execution strategy. I think this is one that probably affects you as well as it affects us. So you might get some good information from that. And then also want to provide some reflections of our experience. So my name is Nancy Gibbons. I am an automation and process control engineering consultant within DuPont Engineering. I'm actually a chemical engineer by background, so my morph over the years into batch automation has been a very natural progression because I understand processes. And so then being able to automate those processes was a very easy transition for me. So that's kind of the role that I provided on this project, was as a batch subject matter expert. So in Hayward, California, we have a small batch facility. It's in our electronics and imaging business, and they produce very highly valuable cleaning solvents for the electronics industry. So it was primarily a batch, primarily a manual process. They had a control system. It was a PLC5 based system with a third-party HMI, and they had mostly manual steps. They had automated valves and whatnot. They had one automated sequence for adding some bulk raw materials, but that was really it. Now, one thing, though, is that this PLC, with them being able to control the plant, it was definitely critical to quality and critical to their process. So we were faced, just like a lot of you were faced, with legacy control system issues from based primarily in obsolescence. End of life or even past end of life equipment in your facility that, while it may not be giving you issues right now, you're getting closer and closer to those issues coming about, and that would mean unscheduled downtime in your system, which is for most people not ever a good thing. Especially if you're in a sold-out position like we are on a lot of our products. So we also had some other issues just with the configuration of the system itself. We had the HMI was definitely an old style. It was not using any of the newer best practices of grayscale and controlled use of color and that sort of thing. It was also very cluttered, and we really felt that there was a risk of, operator error. Certainly it was not, the best, implementation, at least for what we know now going forward. Also, our alarm set points were kind of all over the place. Some were hard-coded, some were in the HMI. It was hard to document, hard to follow. And we wanted to make some improvements there. We also didn't really have any reports, or certainly nothing electronic. If you wanted to get information to address an issue, you had to go and kind of pull that out, mine that out from the hard copy, and that took a lot of time, and of course a lot of times didn't get done. So at the end of the day, our primary justification for the project came when a Tier 1 customer, through an auditing process, stated that they really wanted us to have automation. They wanted electronic batch records. They wanted to know that their products were being made consistently, batch to batch to batch. Now, we also knew that we had other issues like, excessive dead time. So this is kind of what I call in a batch automation, in a batch process, this is kind of the cousin to downtime, but dead time. A batch is ready to move on, but if the operator is doing some other activity in the plant and hasn't come back to see that this batch, is now ready, then it just sits and waits, and that's really dead time in your process. So if you can have the automation system recognize and move on and continue the process, then you are able to regain that time and, essentially, have more throughput in the plant. But the bottom line justification was really through this, request by the customer. We also, knew that there would be, this improved throughput through the decrease in our dead time as well. So our execution strategy, and this is probably one that you face, we had a local systems integrator that the sites worked with for years. And that systems integrator knows the site. They knew the old code, and they were just a few minutes away, and so they really wanted to continue that relationship. But that systems integrator didn't have the experience either in the Rockwell Plant PAX platform that we were planning to implement, using the Plant PAX process objects. And then they also didn't have the experience with implementing an S88 compliant software solution like the Rockwell Factory Talk Batch software. And so what we decided to do is to do mainly two phases, where first we upgraded the PLC and the HMI. And we did that with the systems integrator using the Plant PAX solution. And then the second item was to then overlay the Factory Talk Batch application on that layer. And so what we did was we had our systems integrator actually do phase one with my support, teaching them, instructing them in the use of the Plant PAX process objects and how to deploy that system. And then in the batch automation phase, what we did is we actually brought in a third party. We brought in Rockwell to work with us on the design and implementation of that automation layer, but we didn't exclude the systems integrator. We kept the systems integrator involved all through that process in a very integral fashion, so that this was their training ground. This was their exposure to the design methodologies, to the thinking behind the application that they were going to support long term, and it was their training for being able to support that system and expand that system in the long term. So these are the different stages of the project execution. I'm not going to go through it all in detail, but throughout the process, there was involvement both from DuPont, from our systems integrator, Technosian, and Rockwell. And we made sure that it wasn't just Technosian sitting on the sidelines observing. We actually got them involved. They did about 40% of the configuration, like the repeat instances of phases and recipes after Rockwell had, configured the first, round of those. And then they also were very involved in the commissioning at site as well. And then even today, they continue to support the system. And, I still get calls from them every once in a while, providing a little direction, but they're becoming more and more autonomous, which was our goal in this execution strategy. So our commissioning and our startup was very smooth. We actually did everything over a weekend, and, started up on a Sunday afternoon, the next batch. And then throughout that week, every new batch that was run was started and run through this new batch automation system. And so we provided, full coverage, both between DuPont, Rockwell, and Technosian. We had 2 teams of people from each organization that were there, and we actually worked hand in hand with operations throughout that first week. And we achieved an on-time, 100% quality with no production downtime, result for this project for the commissioning and startup. So this is just a list of kind of the improvements that we saw with our systems, and then just some reflections. One thing that we got this advice early on, and for whatever reason we decided not to take it, was we really would, if you're going to do this sort of an execution strategy, you really need to have a single, from the end user perspective, you really need to contract with a single supplier, and then have that supplier subcontract. Whoever's going to be the lead, you need them then to subcontract with that other supplier. As Jim called it, a single throat to choke. I love that. And but from a communication standpoint, from a responsibilities standpoint, accountability standpoint, I think that definitely would have made things a little bit easier, with all the coordination and the communications that it took to kind of keep, everybody in line. One thing when you're working with a systems integrator, make sure that they're following the guidelines provided by the vendors of your, of your system. So we had a little bit of issue with that. It turned out to be a risk that we investigated. We did our due diligence. We decided to proceed, but it's not the decision that we would have made, if we had that decision earlier. So just some acknowledgments. These are the folks that worked on the project, both from Rockwell Automation and from Technosian. We worked very well together over a number of months as a very cohesive team, and it was a very good experience.